A trove of 13.4 million leaked documents exposes ties between Russia and a host of Western officials, including Donald Trump's billionaire Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross. The leaked Paradise Papers also exposed the business dealings of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's main fundraiser and the offshore interests of Queen Elizabeth II and some 120 politicians from around the world, as well as a number of Israeli business people. The Paradise Papers leak reveals the extent to which American politics relies on personal wealth and the financial system outside of the United States. It also sheds light on corporate giants like Apple, Nike and others, who manage to minimize the taxes they pay through increasingly imaginative accounting maneuvers. The leaked data discloses offshore ties of more than a dozen Trump advisors, cabinet members, and major donors. Paradise Papers: Secrets of the Global Elite. The International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. One of the biggest revelations in the Paradise Papers touch on investments by Ross, Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary and owner of a shipping company who recorded income of more than $68 million since 2014 from a Russian energy company, which is partly owned by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Greater than. Get all updates on Israel and Trump. Download our free app and subscribe. Greater than. We've got more newsletters we think you'll find interesting. Click here. Please try again later. Ross has also used companies registered in the Cayman Islands to hold financial interests in the shipping firm Navigator Holdings, whose clients include the Russian energy company Sibur, which is partly owned by the state. Among Sibur's owners are Putin's son-in-law Kirill Shamalov and Gennady Timchenko, a billionaire who has been subject to U.S. sanctions since 2014 because of his ties with Putin. Sibur is a key client for Navigator Holdings, which paid it over $23 million in 2016. Ross ended ties to 80 companies upon joining the Trump cabinet, but continues to own 9 companies, including 4 that tie him to Navigator and its Russian clients. The new files arrived from 2 service companies located in Bermuda and Singapore and from 19 corporate registries maintained by 2 governments, in countries that often serve as way stations in the global shadowy economy. The leaks were obtained by the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung, which shared them with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and a network of over 380 reporters and newspapers in 67 countries, including Haaretz. Wilbur Ross, U.S. Commerce Secretary, speaks during an Economic Club of New York event in New York, U.S., on Wednesday, October 25, 2017. Michael Nagel. Bloomberg knew from Russia. The leaked Paradise files also had new revelations about business ties between Russia and the United States. One paper directed ICIJ to public documents and to files in the Panama Papers, which shed light on relationships between 2 finance companies owned by the Kremlin, and a Russian billionaire who was heavily invested in Twitter and Facebook. In 2011, when the Russian bank VTB Bank secretly invested $191 million in Twitter, the deal was mediated by the investments fund belonging to Russian tycoon Yuri Milner. The papers also show that a subsidiary of Russian authority giant Gazprom, which is controlled by the Kremlin, financed a front company, which by virtue of belonging to a company associated with Milner, owned about $1 billion worth of Facebook share, shortly before the company floated stock on Wall Street in 2012. Shortly before that, Milner put $850,000 into Cadre, a real estate company established by Trump's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner. Milner is a Russian citizen living in Silicon Valley. His connections with Twitter, Facebook and Kushner's company have been revealed beforehand, but his connections with Kremlin financial institutions have not been known until now. A spokesman for Milner's investments firm confirmed that VTB did invest through it in Twitter. Milner himself said in an interview that he hadn't been aware of Gazprom's involvement in his business. He also said that none of his investments have a political side, and that the investments in Kushner's firm had been done with his own money. Tax shelters promise secrecy. They make it easier to hide the control over companies. Setting up a company is perfectly legal, but secrecy attracts money launderers, drug traffickers, kleptocrats robbing their own countries blind, and others who prefer to act in the shadows. Front companies with no employees or offices are also a way to dodge tax and steal billions from one's mother country. As far as the Israeli tax authorities are concerned, owning property or companies in tax shelters is not an offense, if done openly. This habit of registering companies in tax shelters makes the poor poorer and exacerbates inequality, argues Brooke Harrington of the Copenhagen Business School, who wrote Capital Without Borders: Wealth Managers and the 1%. There's a clique that isn't subject to the law like everybody else. She says they live the dream life but don't pay the piper. The Paradise Papers are a significant expansion beyond the Panama Papers, leaked in 2016, which ICIJ and its partners in the press also investigated. The records significantly expand on the revelations from the leak of offshore documents that spawned the 2016 Panama Papers investigation by ICIJ and its media partners. The new files shine a light on a different cast of underexplored island havens, including some with cleaner reputations and higher price tags, such as the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. The most detailed exposes how a law firm named Appleby and Estera, which had been Applebee's corporate services division until being spun off in 2016, registered companies in tax shelters over decades. Applebee's clientele applaud its expertise, efficiency and network of experts around the world. Other law firms frequently use it when operating abroad, but documents dating over decades indicate that it wasn't too fussy about its customers, and didn't oversee cash flows. The nearly 7 million files of Appleby and its subsidiaries date from the 1950s to 2016. The information includes emails, loan agreements worth billions and bank statements of at least 25,000 companies, affiliated with people in 180 countries. With offices in Bermuda, Hong Kong, Shanghai, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands and other offshore tax shelters, Applebee's belongs to the unofficial association of leading global law firms. The company had jealously protected its good name for about a century and avoided scandal. But the files reveal that it provided services to dubious clients such as Iran, Russia and Libya, concealed audits of failing governments that were laundering money, and that it had secretly been fined by the Bermudan regulator. Applebee's did not respond to questions by ICIJ, though it did publish a statement on its site. Appleby has thoroughly and vigorously investigated the allegations, and we are satisfied that there is no evidence of any wrongdoing, either on the part of ourselves or our clients. Appleby also said that it operates in highly regulated jurisdictions, and like all professional organizations in our regions, we are subject to frequent regulatory checks. The leaks also reveal spy planes bought by UAE, a company in Barbados that makes explosives owned by a Canadian engineer who tried to build a super gun for Saddam Hussein, and the company registered in Bermuda by the deceased Mexican priest Marcial Miquel Degollado, who founded the Catholic order called the Legion of Christ, and who has been accused of molesting children. Secrets from the boardroom. When Appleby isn't serving the interests of the world's richest people, it is giving legal advice to companies seeking to pay less in taxes. The firm is not a tax advisor, but it has a significant share of the tax schemes used by companies around the world. The files reveal that Apple Inc., the most profitable company in the United States, was looking for a new tax haven in Europe and the Caribbean after a Senate inquiry found that the technology giant had avoided tens of billions of dollars in tax payments by transferring its profits to a subsidiary in Ireland. Appleby is a link in a chain that helps sports stars, Russian tycoons and government officials to buy private jets, yachts and other toys. Experts in the tax shelters helped Arkady and Boris Rodenberg, two Russian billionaires and childhood friends of Putin, to buy executive jets worth more than $20 million in 2013. The following year, America put the brothers on a blacklist because of their support for Putin pet projects, and their work with the Russian government. Appleby ended its relationship with the brothers. The Rodenbergs declined to comment, citing PowerPoint presentations prepared originally by an Appleby employee, and other documents show that among Appleby's unsavory clients are a corrupt Pakistani official, two children of the Indonesian dictator Suharto, and an alleged dealer in blood diamonds. Sometimes Appleby reported suspicions pertaining to its clients to the authorities, as the law requires. But in other cases, the dubious clients remained so for years on end, without anybody noticing. Page 2. Pro-Israel activist and gay porn mogul Michael Lucas spoke to so-called alt-right website Breitbart about homophobia in the Muslim world, slamming American liberals as apologists for Islam. Russian-born Lucas is a longtime pro-Israel activist and supporter of efforts to beef up gay tourism to Israel. In the past, he has written political opinion pieces detailing Israel's impressive record on gay rights, organized gay tours of Israel, and recently, and very publicly, pressured the New York LGBT Community Center to cancel meetings and events held by anti-Israel groups. He produced Men of Israel, touted as the first pornographic film to be shot on location in the Holy Land with an all-Israeli Jewish cast, as well as the non-porno, pro-Israel documentary Undressing Israel Gay Men in the Promised Land. Michael Lucas in the Knesset during Pride Month 2011. Tomer Applebaum. Lucas told Breitbart's Aaron Klein that liberals usually tie it to some specific person, specific bad leader when discussing the treatment of the LGBT community in the Arab world, adding it's an inconvenience for them. Steve Bannon's Breitbart has long dabbled in the theme of Muslim hostility toward the LGBT community, having hired Milo Yiannopoulos. U.S. President Donald Trump himself promised to protect the LGBT community in the U.S. from Islamic extremism when accepting the Republican Party nomination for president. In February 2016, Hara Allison Kaplan-Summer reported on Lucas calling protesters who disrupted a reception for Jewish participants at a gay activism conference in Chicago antisemites and Jew haters, accusing the conference organizers of enabling their behavior. We've got more newsletters we think you'll find interesting. Click here. Please try again later. Short transcript of Lucas' interview. Now that we are talking about Muslim homophobia, it is becoming very inconvenient for liberals because liberals are apologists for Islam. So it is becoming very inconvenient, and that is why they usually tie it to some specific person, specific bad leader. For example, it would be Egyptian President Abdel Fattah Sisi, or it would be in Chechnya the leader Chechen President Ramzan Akhmatovich Kadyrov, or it would be one individual that is responsible, or maybe at the most one political party, but not political Islam. So that is exactly what is happening here in this situation. This was happening before Sisi. This is happening all over the Muslim world, all of those Muslim countries to one degree or another. For example, in Saudi Arabia, it is a daily routine, while in Egypt, there are waves. Page 3 to Ephraim O'Sullivan. Lee Harvey Oswald was always Lee, even after he assassinated President John F. Kennedy. Lee was the kid who lived down the street from him in a working-class neighborhood of New Orleans, the classmate who always sat next to him, in alphabetical order, in junior high homeroom. Ephraim, back then still known as Fred, remembered Lee as a loner, a kid he unsuccessfully tried to recruit in high school to the drill team of the Civil Air Patrol, as he would later testify to the Warren Commission that investigated Kennedy's assassination. Oswald carried himself always erect, always gave the impression that he could be marching, that he may be marching, eyes straight ahead, head straight, shoulders back, so he impressed me as the sort of fellow that would really fit well on the drill team, O'Sullivan told the commission. He seemed like he could. Well, he even gave the impression that he would make a pretty good leader if he ever got into the squadron, O'Sullivan added. At the time, O'Sullivan was a 26-year-old police detective on the New Orleans Vice Squad, a cop in the city, like his Irish-American father and grandfather before him. File in this November 23, 1963, file photo, surrounded by detectives, Lee Harvey Oswald talks to the media as he is led down a corridor of the Dallas police station for another round of questioning in CAP ahead of the expected release Thursday of thousands of pages of classified documents related to the assassination. Area O'Sullivan, a longtime journalist in Israel, said his father agreed with the commission that Oswald alone shot Kennedy, but he thought there might be more to the story connected to the mafia. He always thought the assassination of Kennedy and Martin Luther King crossed paths in New Orleans, Area O'Sullivan told Haaretz. He could never elaborate on it, but he said the mafia was strong here, and it was part of his job to investigate the mafia. He thought there was some kind of ties to the killings with the mafia. But he couldn't prove anything. Ephraim O'Sullivan as a police officer in New Orleans, June 1961. Courtesy of Area O'Sullivan. In any case, testifying before the Warren Commission was only one milestone in Ephraim O'Sullivan's extraordinary life. A Catholic who grew up not knowing any Jews, he converted to Judaism in 1967, caught the Zionist bug, moved his family to Israel on the third day of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and became a policeman in Jerusalem. According to his son, he helped out the Mossad on occasion. The father was someone who in his policing days in New Orleans helped foil a plot to assassinate President Richard M. Nixon, arrested a KKK leader en route to planting a bomb at the home of the local head of the Anti-Defamation League, was targeted by the KKK for his work trying to break up that group in New Orleans, and in 1973 was shot in the arm by a young black man targeting white police officers from a hotel rooftop. His best friend, also an officer, and 4 other policemen, and 4 civilians were killed by the gunman. An Uzi assault rifle that O'Sullivan had helped procure from Israeli contacts was the weapon that killed the man, said Area O'Sullivan. Ephraim O'Sullivan volunteering during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Courtesy of Area O'Sullivan, he survived and said, "I am taking my family to a safe country," and he moved us to Israel, the younger O'Sullivan said. He had visited Israel once before, on a United Jewish Appeal trip with his synagogue the year before. When he couldn't afford the trip on his cop's salary, the community pitched in and paid for his ticket. Judaism and a DJ. According to The Sun, Ephraim's path to Judaism started in some ways the night he heard Harry Belafonte's version of Haven Aliyah on the jukebox at a New Orleans bar. He mistook the tune for a Gaelic song, phoned a local DJ he knew and asked him to play the song on the radio. When the DJ put it on the air, he introduced it saying, "Here's a nice Jewish tune for a nice Jewish cop, Fred O'Sullivan." According to his son, O'Sullivan, listening in, was confused and angry. He asked why his DJ friend slurred him by calling him a Jew. When he heard it was a Jewish song and was sung in Israel, a country he barely knew existed, he decided to buy the album and eventually started reading up on Israel and Judaism. One fall, for extra money he worked helping direct traffic at a local Reform synagogue over Rosh Hashanah. The rabbi asked him if he could come back for Yom Kippur. O'Sullivan said he would if he was allowed to use the synagogue library. By 1967, O'Sullivan had converted to Judaism with that same rabbi. Ephraim O'Sullivan at his desk as intelligence chief of the New Orleans Police Department in 1973, the year he immigrated to Israel with his family. Courtesy of Area O'Sullivan. As Area O'Sullivan tells it, when Ephraim decided to convert, his father told him he would rather his son marry a black person than become a Jew, though he used a derogatory term for black person. Area recounted that his father, who had grown up frustrated by the Catholic nuns who told him to stop asking so many questions, used to say, "I was a Jew my whole life but just didn't know it." Ephraim and his father did not speak for a couple of years, but eventually reconciled. On the family's flight to Israel to immigrate as the Yom Kippur War raged in October 1973, the O'Sullivans were the only family on the plane. The others were young men flying back to join the war as reservists. "Everyone looked at us like we were nuts," said Area O'Sullivan, who was 12 at the time. They landed during a blackout and were taken directly to a bomb shelter at an immigrant absorption center outside Jerusalem. Adjusting to life in Israel during wartime and its aftermath was a challenge for the then 37-year-old Ephraim O'Sullivan. Some of the people who had promised him work were killed in the war, and although he did eventually begin a job as a policeman in Jerusalem, his Hebrew was poor and the family moved back to the United States a year and a half later. Area O'Sullivan with a photo of his father, October 2017. Emil Salman. Area O'Sullivan said that after his father died in 2005 at 67 from the complications of diabetes, he went through his papers. Among them, along with a letter from Jacqueline Kennedy thanking him for testifying before the Warren Commission, were handwritten letters thanking him for his service from Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Rabin. There was also a Lebanese driver's license with his photo but a different name. When Area had first seen it years before and asked his father about it, his father told him he was better off not knowing. Area said his father helped out the Mossad but would not elaborate. Jewish Southern drawl. Back in the United States, Ephraim O'Sullivan first found work as the police chief in a small Cajun town of Jennings, Louisiana, where whites lived on one side of town and blacks on the other. For young Area O'Sullivan it was culture shock after living in Jerusalem. His father there became the first Jewish police chief, not just in town, but in all Louisiana. When people had trouble pronouncing his first name, he'd ask them, "How do you like your eggs in the morning?" Ephraim O'Sullivan when he served as police chief in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, 1980. Courtesy of Area O'Sullivan. Ephraim O'Sullivan visiting Israel in 1984. Courtesy of Area O'Sullivan. Ephraim, they would usually reply, so he told them, "That's how you say Ephraim." Later he was chief of police in Ocean Springs, a town on the Mississippi coast near Biloxi. He also made history there as the first Jewish chief of police in Mississippi. He never returned to Israel to live but continued to love it there and would often visit his son, who returned to live in Israel in his 20s and raised his family there. Meanwhile, his New Orleans detective days remained a source of great stories. One Area O'Sullivan remembers well was his father's last night of duty as a detective in the city before immigrating to Israel. It was Rosh Hashanah Eve, September 1973, and his father had received a tip from the FBI that a noted Klansman named Byron De La Beckwith was heading to the city to plant a bomb at the home of the New Orleans ADL chief, Adolph Butnick. O'Sullivan and his partner stopped De La Beckwith before he could reach the house and arrested him. The invitation to Ephraim O'Sullivan to testify to the Warren Commission. Courtesy of Area O'Sullivan. The envelope of the invitation to Ephraim O'Sullivan to testify to the Warren Commission. Courtesy of Area O'Sullivan, and it was in the backseat of their police car that the handcuffed De La Beckwith confessed, without prompting, that he was the man who assassinated civil rights icon Medgar Evers 10 years earlier, something he had denied in 2 mistrials. In 1994 he was finally convicted of Evers' murder. O'Sullivan's written testimony was used in the trial. According to Area O'Sullivan, the Kennedy assassination was the one story that never went away for his father. Over the years, conspiracy theorists would try to seek him out, in part for his testimony about David Ferrie, a New Orleans man who his father and Oswald knew and who may have had ties with the mafia. Ephraim O'Sullivan had first met Ferrie during his Civil Air Patrol days, where Ferrie was like a scoutmaster of the group. In his Warren Commission testimony, O'Sullivan told the investigators that he and another New Orleans detective went to examine Ferrie's plane at the New Orleans airport soon after the assassination. "We wanted to check it to see if it was flyable," he said, to see possibly whether he had been flying it lately, with the thought that he may have transported Oswald to Dallas. "We found the plane, but his plane was not in flyable condition. It had flat tires, instruments missing, needed a paint job. We also checked to see if he had rented an aircraft from any of the companies out there, and one company in particular said they wouldn't rent him an airplane. So that scouting mission appeared to be a bust." But Ferrie was later mentioned as a suspect in the assassination by Jim Garrison, the New Orleans district attorney at the time. In Oliver Stone's movie JFK, Ferrie was played by Joe Pesci. Area O'Sullivan said his father would have probably gotten a kick out of the release of the long classified documents related to the Kennedy assassination. He would always say, "People will always believe in conspiracy theories. There's nothing you can do," Area O'Sullivan said, adding that his father had his own unproved theories of involvement by the mafia, and possibly Fidel Castro. "It's the story that won't die."